Well, what's up again there, guys? Brian here at 3TR here, bringing you another awesome movie review, this time going over my most anticipated movie of 2016, simply titled Suicide Squad. Now, this movie was directed by David Ayer and has the really awesome cast of Jared Leto, Will Smith, Margaret Robbie, Viola Davis, and Joel Kinnaman. And the events of this movie take place after Batman vs. Superman, in which, after Superman's death, Viola Davis, who plays as Amanda Waller, believes that she needs to build some sort of task force to protect pretty much the interests of their government from the next metahuman attack. And what she does is she kind of just goes around and just captures all these really unique characters to build this task force-esque. But then something happens with, let's just say, a certain character element that goes completely haywire, and then she's then forced to have to send in this team in order to pretty much handle the situation. Now, I'm going to say this. This movie is getting very, mostly negative reviews, but has done phenomenally well in the box office. Therefore, it's kind of a bit of a paradox, in a sense. I'm going to say this. For this to be my most anticipated movie, I was really going into this movie with the highest expectations. I had been saying for the past 6 months that if there was any movie, any movie that could top probably my favorite movie of the year so far, Deadpool, which was perfect in my opinion. If there was any movie that could do it, it would be this one. And unfortunately, it didn't even come close. This movie is an utter mess in the worst way. However, there are good elements, so let me just go over what I think the movie did right. I think a number of the characters in this movie were actually done very well. Most specifically, I thought that Will Smith's portrayal of Deadshot was spot on. They got the character right just fine, and he even added his own personal charismal charm, which Will Smith is very known for. I think he was so well in this film that I would actually be happy to see a total movie just focusing on his character. He was by far my favorite character of the film. I thought that Margaret Robbie's portrayal of Harley Quinn was... It definitely had a lot of the elements that I had seen in Harley Quinn, but it added its own different taste to it. And so it made it very diverse and made it stand apart from the interpretations of Harley Quinn that I've been accustomed to. That being the animated series version of Harley Quinn and then the Arkham series of Harley Quinn. So I like that this one could stand apart but kind of keep the core elements. I thought that Viola Davis's portrayal of Amanda Waller was also very perfectly handled. She absolutely captured the presence of this character of being a real, hate saying this, stuck-up bitch who's just absolutely ruthless. I think I would love to see this character come back in a future film, and I think she would even make a really well-done enemy to the Justice League, having this new task force at her disposal. Now, that's really where most of the positives end, because after that, this is where my problem is that the Suicide Squad team itself is fine. My problem is I don't really think that a number of these members were really meant to be in this film. I don't really think they served a purpose. Because, for the most part, you don't really get enough backstory for these characters. They have like maybe a quick 1-minute backstory kind of showing you what they do. And that's about it. But they're not really important in my opinion. They kind of just are there to take up space. For example, Slipknot literally is in the movie for maybe 2 minutes and gets killed off. That's not really a spoiler, kind of a waste of a character. You have Captain Boomerang, played by Jai Courtner. He did not play his character badly. I thought he was fine, but they don't really give him anything to do, and he's really an overall useless character. I mean, he throws boomerangs, and I think he only does that maybe twice throughout the entire film. You have Katana, who's also another interesting character, but she's just sort of there. I mean, she's got a cool little backstory about her sword being able to capture the souls of those who she kills, but she's only got like one quick scene and they kind of pass over that. Diablo probably had the, in my opinion, probably the most emotional character arc, but he really doesn't do anything until the last third of the film, and by that time it just becomes really hard to care. And this is a common theme that I've seen through a lot of these DC films, and adding all these characters and not spending enough time developing them. And this is no more apparent this is no more better shown with the portrayal of Jared Leto's the Joker. Now look, there was no way, in my opinion, I thought he was going to top Heath Ledger. And in this movie, I don't think he does. But the problem is that we don't really see enough of his Joker to really get a really solid analysis of his character and what he's all about. And even Jared Leto himself complained that a lot of his scenes were cut. And this really pisses me off, because this tells me that they're going to pull the same scenes that they did with Batman vs. Superman, in which there was just so much of this movie that felt like it was missing, that they wanted to show it at a different time. And I felt like, okay, why couldn't you have just added those movies in? If you need to make the movie longer in order to make this very, very iconic character seem relevant, I'm fine. If you needed to add another 20 or 30 minutes and make the movie, 2 hours and 40 minutes long, I would have been fine with that. But we don't get that here. And it just feels like if you had taken the Joker out, the movie really wouldn't have changed all that much. Another problem I have with this movie is that the soundtrack is just really too distinctive. It is just way too random, and I thought it was very, very distracting at times. I mean, when something would happen, they would play like this really familiar song, and I think maybe the first 2 times I thought I was okay with it, but after that, it kind of got distracting. And it's clear to see what DC and Warner Brothers was trying to do. They were trying to capture that whole Guardians of the Galaxy feeling, but the problem with that is that the way that Marvel handled that was that the music was very relevant to what was going on at that moment and actually played a significant role in the characters. And that's why that movie's soundtrack worked and this one didn't. It just seemed like a bunch of different random music videos just thrown together just for the hell of it. Another thing that I also thought was very disappointing was the action scenes. Trust me, there's a good number of action, but it's just kind of all too the same. I mean, most of the enemies in this movie, or pretty much the main enemies that they're fighting, are these like mutated humans that just kind of crumble away when you hit them. And after seeing the first action scene, which I will say is probably my favorite, it just isn't all that interesting and investing anymore. And I have to say that the villain, which I'm sure most of you know by now, it just sucked. It just sucked. This was definitely fits in probably the top 10 worst villains I've seen in a comic book related movie to date, because with who this character was and with as much information as a certain character should have had on this character, this should not have happened. I mean, she had this little contingency plan, which I'm not going to mention, and she thought that that was the only way to keep this character under control. But you're telling me you didn't have other contingency plans? I mean, if it were me, I would have had like 2 or 3 backup plans set in place in case this one important character got out of control. And it didn't. She didn't do that, and that just felt very, very out of character for another important character. As you can see, I really want to like this movie. I really did, but it just, there was just too many things wrong for me to really enjoy it. And the fact that this was my most anticipated movie of the year makes it even that much more disappointing. Look, I'll openly admit that I do think this was better than Batman vs. Superman, because going into that film, I already had really, really bad expectations for that film, and the movie just ended up being worse than I thought it was going to be. And heck, even after watching the Ultimate Edition, it went from being a movie that I thought was just boring and disappointing to being a movie that I openly really disliked, with the only good factor of that entire film being Ben Affleck's Batman. And the problem I have with this film was that I really thought it was just going to be a live-action interpretation of the very, very awesome Batman Assault on Arkham animated film. If you really want to see how the Suicide Squad is supposed to be structured, I suggest watching that film. Because what makes this Suicide Squad very, very inferior to that one is that that one had characters that were specifically chosen for that assignment in that movie. They all had specific uses and they had a purpose. This one didn't feel like that. It felt like they just brought these characters together just because they were there. I mean, Amanda Waller even made this whole iconic speech talking about how the next war was going to be fought with metahumans. When you actually look at this team, there's only maybe 2 people who are metahumans. I mean, let's think about it. Deadshot, not a metahuman. Harley Quinn, not a metahuman. Rick Flag, not a metahuman. Slipknot, not a metahuman. Katana, not a metahuman. So this whole concept of having metahumans fight metahumans only happens once throughout the entire film. So this concept you were spouting out at the very beginning of the film was false. And I felt very, very disappointed about that. I mean, it should have been a much more contained and grounded assignment. Not this end of the world type style stuff that we get in almost every other superhero film that ends up being disappointing. Look, I'm just tired of talking about it, but I will say this: if you like this film, stick to your guns. I'm happy that you had fun with it, but we're kind of at the point, at least for me, where I'm kind of sick of going into these comic book movies having to turn off my brain in order to enjoy them. I'm sick of that. Marvel had already mastered that type of storytelling and movie making for comic book movies years ago, and they have now evolved into actually telling comic book story movies that you actually care about the characters. You're invested in the story. And heck, if you can do that with a comic book storyline, you're golden. You have the material. Just use it to its maximum effect. And I just don't feel that this time around they did that with Suicide Squad. They had a concept, they had a number of really, really good story elements that I would like to see continue, but as an overall film, it just was very, very disappointing to me. So if I had to give Suicide Squad a rating, I'm going to have to give it a very, very disappointing C-. This is probably not something I'm going to see. I have no interest in seeing the Ultimate Edition, which I'm sure Warner Brothers is going to release, and I just hope that if they're going to do a Suicide Squad 2, which I'm pretty sure they will since this movie has just been knocking out box office records, they fix these issues and they make us care about these characters, and they actually bring in characters that are actually important and relevant to the situation at hand. And if you can do that, I promise you I will enjoy the sequel when it comes out. So, tell me your thoughts of Suicide Squad in the comments down below, and if you like this review, feel free to like, comment down below, and please subscribe to check me out my future movie reviews. And like always, thank you guys for watching, you're awesome, and I'll see you next time.